Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thank you so much for tuning in here on Monday, May 8th. Look, we've been talking about it since the draft. We've talked about the draft a lot, but the Jaguars, they still have some needs to fill. We've been talking about it here on the channel. If the Jaguars want to have a real championship type roster on paper, and look, of course, we all know games aren't played on paper. Trevor Lawrence told us that last week, right? But if they want to have a championship roster on paper, if they want to have all their holes filled and have a roster that has depth in the most important areas of the roster heading into 2023, you're going to need, obviously, development from your youngsters. You're going to need this draft class to be able to make an impact down the stretch, a positive impact down the stretch. But you're also probably going to need to add a talented free agent here or there just to shore things up in certain spots. For me, that starts with edge. We talked about that last week. You really need to cement that position behind Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, in my opinion. Do you have some options that could take a step forward in 2023 on this roster? Yes. But do you feel confident that any of them necessarily will? I'm not so sure. So for me, it starts at edge, but it does not end at edge. I think corner is extremely important. The Jaguars, you really like what you have in Tyson Campbell and Darius Williams. I think they're both very good corners, outside corners for you. And you do have some youngsters, kind of like edge, that could step up. You have Eric Hallett, Christian Braswell from this 2023 NFL draft class. You have Gregory Jr. and Buster Brown from 2022, but these are all late round selections. They were not high draft capital selections, so I'm not sure that you can feel really confident in banking on one of those four guys taking a step forward to be someone who could be a solid contributor for you in 2023. It's possible. But is that something you want to bank on? I'm not sure. Then you have Trey Herndon, who plays the slot, right? Can play decent for you in zone coverage from the slot. Man-to-man, I just don't think he has the athleticism and the skill to hold up in those man-to-man looks, whether it's in the slot or on the outside for the Jaguars, to be completely honest. Trey Herndon, I don't think is the worst possible option. But again, this is a team that has aspirations of winning their division for the second straight year, of getting past the divisional round in the playoffs in a loaded AFC. I think you want to be a little bit more comfortable with that CB3 spot and with the depth of this group. At least I do. And when you talk about these fits, player fits in free agency, I think you have to talk about what you want to be on defense this year if you're the Jaguars. I think based on Mike Caldwell's 2022 campaign, his first as the defensive coordinator for the Jaguars, his first as a defensive coordinator anywhere, this team wants to be multiple. That's what the Buccaneers have done for a long time under Todd Bowles. Mike Caldwell comes from the Todd Bowles coaching tree. I think they're going to want to be multiple. They're going to give you a bunch of different looks up front. They're going to give you a bunch of different looks in coverage on the back end as well. Now, whether they want to lean a little bit more zone heavy or man heavy, I think that can have an impact on potentially who you want to bring in from free agency. For me, they ran a lot of both in 2022, both zone coverage and man coverage on money downs. I think they started shifting a little bit more to zone and finding a little bit more success. I think it makes sense with the group of talent that they currently have, the personnel that the Jaguars have, especially with Tyson Campbell, who is much better in zone with his eyes in the backfield. Darius Williams is way better in zone as well. And as I mentioned, so is Trey Herndon. So right now, the Jaguars' top three cover corners are all best in zone coverage. So if you want to lean zone heavy, maybe you add another guy who excels in zone. If you want to have a change-up type player, maybe you go get someone who can play more man coverage for you. And maybe you want to find someone who can do a bit of both. That's probably the best fit. Someone who can do a little bit of both at a fairly high level for the Jaguars, because they are going to run both. And now, do you want a slot corner, an outside corner? Personally, I think finding someone who can play slot makes the most sense for the 2023 Jaguars. And when you're pursuing free agents, generally speaking, it's not a long-term investment, especially at this point in the year. So getting someone who can help you the most in 2023, the year that you're signing them, I think makes a lot of sense. But yeah, again, make no mistake about it for me. this cornerback room needs one more piece to contend at the highest level. Because even if you feel fine with Trey Herndon in the slot, you're one injury away from this cornerback group potentially breaking, right? If you have an injury and let's say Darius Williams or Tyson Campbell goes down, and you hate to even talk about injuries, but when you're building a roster, you have to factor in there's probably going to be an injury at this position somewhere along the line. And so if you lose one of those guys, one of your top two guys, Darius or Tyson Campbell, where are you at as a coverage group? I think you're in pretty big trouble. And I think you're already in a decent amount of trouble with your CB3. I'm not a proponent of Trey Herndon being a starting nickel. I think if he's your fourth or fifth cornerback, you're fine. But I'm not a proponent of him being a starter for you. Quite frankly, I'm just not. And so that brings us to these free agents that are available right now. Following the draft, these free agents will not impact the compensatory pick formula, so the Jaguars don't have to worry about, if we sign this guy, we're going to end up losing a compensatory pick in the 2024 NFL draft. Nothing like that's going to happen. The Jaguars can go sign who they want right now at this point and not have it impact that comp pick situation. So we'll go ahead and run through a list of players here who I think could make sense for the Jaguars. And again, there are a lot of free agent cornerbacks available. There's a lot of experienced free agent cornerbacks available and a lot of guys who have talent. So let's go ahead and dive into it here, shall we? Marcus Peters, he's 30 years old. He's an absolute ball hawk in man coverage. Do I think he fits best if you want to run primarily zone? Probably not the best fit. But I think he can do some zone looks for you and a really good man-to-man cover corner. So I think he gives you a change-up. And again, this is a guy who did not play in 2021 due to an ACL that he suffered right before the season started. And then in 2022 was kind of still getting his sea legs under him. 30 years old, so is a little bit up there in age. A lot of the guys we're going to talk about are. And I think that's good because you want a veteran with a lot of experience, playoff experience as well. Marcus Peters has that in spades, but again, one of the best ball hawks of the last 5 to 10 years, like a guy who just consistently has picked passes off at a high level. And could that make sense for the Jaguars? A team that have a really talented offense, a team that wants to force more turnovers in 2023, a team that did force a lot of turnovers in 2022. Could you go get someone who could help that even more and bring your turnover margin up even higher? I think so, and I think Marcus Peters could make sense. Probably borderline on the culture fit type of deal that the Jaguars have talked about. Culture and character has been one of the key traits for the Jaguars, this current regime. But Doug Peterson mentioned it a couple weeks ago. They might swing for a guy who might not have the best character because they feel so strongly about their locker room now that they've built up at this point, the culture that they've built. They think that they can take on maybe one guy who doesn't necessarily fit as long as that player is going to help them win football games. And I think Marcus Peters could be a candidate in that regard, certainly. He is an outside corner. I don't think you would see him playing inside. So if you brought him in, he would probably be you'd probably have Darius and him kind of trading outside and then Darius bumping inside in clear pass rushing situations and situations where you're going to be playing nickel. Does Darius do his best work inside? No, he's a better outside corner. But I think he can do a good job for you as a slot corner as well. So we'll see how that plays out if Marcus Peters draws any interest from the Jaguars. But we've also got Bryce Callahan here, who the Jaguars, they faced twice last year. Was playing for the Los Angeles Chargers. I think Christian Kirk got him a couple times last year. But I think he could be the slot that comes in and, you can leave Darius Williams and Tyson Campbell outside, not have to worry about how that fit works, and put Bryce Callahan in the slot, 31 years old, plays at a high level still. Not the same elite slot defender that he was a couple years ago, in my opinion, but still a guy who would be a massive upgrade over what you have currently. And I think he does have the skill, the athleticism to play zone or man at a fairly high level, which I think could really work for what the Jaguars need. Casey Hayward, another one who has spent a long time in this league. He's 33 years old. He's coming off a season that was cut short by a pectoral injury in Atlanta, but he's still a really big-time zone defender when healthy. He's more of an outside guy, but he did play a little bit more in the slot as a younger player, so maybe he could play slot for you. But either way, whether you're bringing him in to play slot or compete to play outside with Darius Williams, if your top three is Tyson Campbell, Darius Williams, and Casey Hayward, that's a lot better than what you've got right now. No question about it. Anthony Brown, he's an interesting one. He's 29 years old, played his whole career in Dallas so far, former second-round pick. He's a very good zone coverage player, and he has very good speed and athleticism he can bring to the table. Mostly an outside corner, but again, a little earlier in his career, kind of like Bryce Callahan, played some inside as well. I would project him more to be an outside corner, like I said. But if you're leaning into those zone coverage looks that the Jaguars ran more down the stretch last year, I think Anthony Brown could make sense. Bradley Roby, he's played a lot of slot during his time in the NFL, has big time speed. I think he could make sense for the Jaguars if they're looking at a slot only. I think Troy Hill, he's a guy that's played inside and outside, a lot throughout his career, kind of done both. He has experience playing for the Rams and playing with Darius Williams, who the Jaguars brought over from the Rams last year. He's better in zone than man, so that could make sense if you really want to lean into this zone-heavy defense because it fits your personnel better. I think Troy Hill would fit into that and could play nickel for you. Ronald Darby, the last one I wanted to bring up here, he's an outside corner, in my opinion. And he's a really talented outside corner. He should be a starting corner in this league, but he's coming off an ACL injury that he suffered last year when he was a member of the Denver Broncos. Not sure where his recovery timeline is. I think he got injured in week 5 or week 6. So again, not sure exactly when he's going to be ready to play and what his recovery timeline is, how effective he will be early on in the season. But another guy, extremely talented. When you're talking about just looking at your top 3 corners, if one of them is Ronald Darby along with Tyson Campbell and Darius Williams, you can feel a lot better about that than what you currently have. Will the Jaguars make a splash at corner? I'm not positive. I think they do like Trey Herndon. I think they do feel fairly confident in him at nickel. I think they like Eric Hallett and Christian Braswell as well as two people who could come in and compete for the nickel spot. But I would definitely be bringing in another corner because, again, this is a team that is trying to take another step forward. You have the salary cap space to afford it. They currently have over $14 million. They could get more relief in terms of salary cap space if Evan Ingram signs a multi-year deal with the team. They're also going to have some relief, it looks like, because of the Cam Robinson suspension. Up to $6 million, I think, is what that's looking like, that will come off the salary cap table because of that suspension whenever it becomes official. We don't know how long he will be suspended for, so we'll see how that all plays out. But it does look like they'll get cap relief from that as well. So I think the Jaguars, if they want to, they have plenty of options to upgrade the secondary. I would highly recommend upgrading the secondary because you're trying to take another step forward. You have a little bit of a weakness at CB3. If any of your top 2 guys go down, you have a major weakness at the position. And that kind of broke the Jaguars' defense last year before they figured out to put Darius Williams outside instead of in the slot. That kind of settled things down once they got Darius Williams outside. But again, I think you could definitely stand to upgrade the room. The goal for 2023 and beyond should be to bring home a Lombardi, with Trevor Lawrence and with Doug Peterson. And so I think if you're going to do that in 2023, you probably need to add to the secondary. You probably need to add to your edge group as well. That is going to do it, though, here. Thank you so much for tuning in to Duval Daily. Hit me up on Twitter at Jordan DeLugo. Let me know what you think about the corners that are available on the free agent market and if the Jaguars need to pursue one. You can also hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Drop a comment in the comment section below. Hit the notification bell. If you're on your podcast platform of choice, please subscribe and review. Really helps us out a ton. Thank you so much for tuning in, Duval.